Critical reasoning, one of the most important and critical parts of logical reasoning section for any competitive examination. Today's session is focused on the SSC CGL exam and other SSC examinations, MTS, CPO, wherever critical reasoning holds importance. And of late, critical reasoning is climbing the charts. Suddenly the importance value is increasing and the questions are actually very dicey. I'm sure you are one of those students who actually suffers a lot from critical reasoning, and they are always in an assumption that we are going to give a field-based answer because we don't know the concept. Everybody says learn the concept, but we don't know where to learn the concept from. So let's start the session right away. By the end of this session, you will be able to understand a lot of deep analysis and a good aspect of critical reasoning. And this is a two-part series for you, exclusively for students of the Oliveboard platform. A two-part series free of cost. Today I will do a complete analysis of breakdown of critical reasoning for you point by point, giving you wonderful insights in the topic, and tomorrow we will practice some important questions based on the same topic, right? So let's start. Deep analysis for critical reasoning. Now, critical reasoning is one part of reasoning where it is not simple analytical. That means it is not simply formula based, calculation based, approach based. There is a slight difference. There has to be a skill which needs to be developed, and that skill is known as critical thinking skills. To be very precise, if I tell you what is critical reasoning basically has got nothing to do with the word critical which you know. You might know critical, which is something as very extreme or very sudden, like the health condition is very critical of the person, but that critical is not this one. This critical comes from the word critique, right? You must have heard the term movie critic. So critic means people who have opinions, critics, and critique in itself is an opinion. So from the word critique comes critical, and from critical comes critical thinking, and wherever you solve a question utilizing critical thinking and reasoning, the approach becomes critical reasoning. Critical reasoning means the ability to have an opinion, to understand the other's opinion, and to be able to put across your thought to somebody else, right? To empathize, to sympathize. There are a lot of aspects involved here, and it is very, very, very mind involved. It is not a simple thing that you read, okay, these 4 topics are there, you tick mark, if this is not there, you cross. It is not going to help you that way. This is not mathematical at all. So please do not, other aspects of logical reasoning are mathematical, but this one is not. So let's understand in brief why critical reasoning is very important. It tests your ability to analyze, evaluate and construct arguments logically. So this actually tests the logical part of logical reasoning in you, right? And of late, if you observe, critical reasoning has suddenly risen in examinations. There was a time when SSC was not asking even a single question, and then when it all started, they were asking only one question from statement conclusion, one question from statement assumption randomly. Sometimes, let's say out of 30 shifts, they would ask in one shift and that's it. But gradually the importance is picking up, especially after reasoning being introduced in tier 2. And even thereafter, now the importance is increasing more and more day by day. And now if I compare it, I'll just take the name of another examination, that is RRB exams. Now in RRB, if you observe, also critical reasoning has always been important, but suddenly there is a shift now. The shift towards from statement based questions towards passage based questions. That makes it all the more interesting and all the more challenging at the same time. So you have to be careful about that. Weightage classification, I'll tell you, so far if you observe the data, it is low to medium only. That means out of 25 questions, maybe 1 or 2 questions. Out of 30 questions in tier 2, maybe 2 or 3 questions, right? So percentage wise, you will feel that the weightage is not as much, but the impact is very high. Even one question can make or break it. And because, see, don't check the number of questions. That is not the only parameter which is important. You have to understand that how much impact that question has on the audience, because if there are, let's say, 10 lakh students who are appearing for the examination, and if there is a simple question of number series, almost everybody is going to attempt it. So that is not making a very big difference. But if there is a question of critical reasoning which has, let's say, a success rate of only 20%, that means out of 100 students, only 20 of them can get it correctly, 80 of them are going to get it wrong, and those 20 also, at least 10 of them will get it correctly only by fluke. Only 10 of them will be able to actually think, assess and then answer. So that brings you in the cream. If you're able to answer those 2-3 questions accurately, correctly, you will straight away come in the cream. So that way critical reasoning becomes very important. So that is high impact potential. And of course, consistent presence, we all know that in the last 5 years, it is consistently there. In Tier 2, definitely you will always see critical reasoning. Tier 1 also lays a lot of emphasis on critical reasoning. Right? And now they have introduced 2 more points here. So I'll just give you a quick overview of what is critical reasoning all about. So like I shared with you, what is critical reasoning? It is basically divided into 2 parts. Okay, for question formation. Part number 1 is statement based. Part number 1 is statement based. Part number 2 is no statement based. Now what is the difference? Simple difference. The word statement in logical reasoning implies the sentences which hold a lot of value. That means whatever is written after the word statement is always going to be 100% correct, no matter the logical sequence. Even if it is logically flawed, you will still assume whatever is written after the word statement to be correct. And the statement will always limit the scope of knowledge. The statement is always going to tell you that this is the only scope of knowledge which you have right now. So answer the question based on this statement alone. Passage based questions also come under this category. So statement based, line based, paragraph based, passage based, they are all under this category. Whatever is provided in the passage, whatever is provided in the statement, whatever is provided in the sentence, the paragraph is assumed to be 100% accurate, correct, and then keeping that in mind, you solve your question. Whereas in no statement based, there are sentences given to you to solve the question, but it is not defining. That means those sentences in itself may be correct or incorrect. So you will have to check the credibility of the sentences and then answer the question. It's a 2-step process, but both involve critical thinking. So this restricts you in a zone and this is liberating. This is actually, endless. You can use any knowledge you have to attempt this. A lot of people are going to tell you that critical reasoning is only limited to what is given to you, whereas this totally changes the aspect. A question of assertion reason, science-based question, actually challenges you to have knowledge, in-depth knowledge of, the topics, to be able to solve those questions. Okay. Now, if I tell you the common topics in statement-based, they are statement assumption, statement conclusion, statement inference, statement argument, and statement course of action. Okay. I'm not going to explain each point right now. This is just a deep analysis of critical reasoning, not of the concept. But if you want the concept, I've already taken a session on YouTube. You can go ahead and check that. Okay, I'll ask the team members to put a link probably, so you can go ahead and see that video for the concept of critical reasoning. And for no statement based, we have topics like cause and effect, one of the most important for Tier 2. We have assertion reason. And we have decision making. Okay. A lot of people are getting confused by the new topics which were suddenly added. They were considering them also to be a part of critical reasoning, though that is not true. But topics like social and emotional intelligence, okay, and ethical dilemma, okay, they are not a direct part of critical reasoning. They do require critical thinking skills up to an extent, but they are not a direct part of critical reasoning. They are learned separately. We will cover those also. Okay. Now, coming to the exam weightage, Tier 1, in the last 4-5 years, you can see out of 25 questions, 1 to 3 questions on an average you have seen in some shifts, not in all the shifts. Sometimes 1 question here and there, sometimes 2 questions. And now critical reasoning actually also involves syllogism up to an extent. So there are, in this data, I have also included syllogism. Okay. So 4 to 12% is the average weightage. And in Tier 2, 30 out of 30 questions, 2 to 4 questions, definitely, for sure. Here the chances are slightly low up until now. But after the change which we saw in the other examinations, probably we are expecting that now tier 1 is also going to have CR based questions. Okay, 2 to 4, that is 7 to 13%. So that holds slightly more value, more importance. Again, as I told you, the frequency, the weightage might not be the only deciding factor. The potential that being asked, and that is having a potential to actually change a lot of things by one question, that is what matters. So for this, now I'll tell you one more insight here. Majority of your questions are still limited to conclusions and assumptions. Majority of the questions. I'm not saying the others are not asked at all, but even now if you observe the pattern for the last 4 or 5 years, you will see more questions from conclusions and assumptions. So at least you should have a focused preparation for these two. See, critical reasoning is very vast. If you're preparing for the next year, then this video is actually accurate for you. Why? Because you will now be able to start from ground zero, completely understand each topic, each point, each thing, and then by the end of this video also, in this session only, I'll tell you some key insights, some key traps which are laid, so that will give you a better understanding. But you still have a good chance. But if you're preparing for tier 2 right now, then probably you don't have the liberty to completely go through critical reasoning at this stage. So you have to have a focused preparation. Focus on these high weightage topics more. That means conclusion based, assumption based questions. You just need to understand what you need to do from the mindset of the examiner, right? Now 5 core CR question types. So as I told you, statement conclusion, statement assumption, strong and weak arguments, that is statement argument, statement course of action, and syllogism. These are all statement based which I am talking about. We have cause and effect, associative decision making also, but the weightage is and the frequency is quite less. So these are the top 5 types which you need to be very nicely familiar with. So statement conclusion means if I have a statement, I want to think from the author's perspective that what is the author finally trying to drive? What is the message the author is finally trying to give me? What is the point where the author is finally trying to take me? That is my conclusion. Always remember, majorly conclusion will be 1 or 2 at max, and mostly it is mentioned towards the end, but not necessarily, right? And the conclusion is always going to be definite. This is not a possible conclusion. If you are definitely sure of something from reading the statement, only then will you assume that only then will you deduce that to be a conclusion, otherwise not. Assumption, on the other hand, depends on what the author is assuming and what is the scope of that assumption. How much can you take for granted here? Because assumption is always going to be something which is not mentioned in your statement. Always. If the question gives you an assumption which is mentioned in your statement, then it is absolutely incorrect. Please mark it as incorrect. Assumptions are always implicit. Implicit means hidden in the statement, not directly visible. Whereas conclusions are mostly explicit. They may be implicit also, but they are mostly explicit. That is, it is clearly visible in your statement, right? And assumptions are from the point of view of the author. Everything is from the point of view of the author, never from your point of view. Your point of view, your opinion does not matter. Please detach yourself emotionally from the questions. That means your moral ground, your moral opinion is of no value in these questions. So if you start thinking in that ways, you are always bound to make an error. I will show you everything. What are the common mistakes which students make? What are the common traps which examiners lay for you in these questions? That is where you're getting, problems. Strong and weak arguments are not very difficult, but there is a common notion among students that you hint for something which is right or wrong. And this challenges the very definition of right or wrong. This says that there is nothing like right or wrong in which I am interested. If I am presenting a question to you, I am only interested in whether the argument which is being provided is a strong argument. That means it supports, it has a strong value, the facts and figures are right, okay. It has some premise which is being mentioned, then it is a strong argument. If it is just being compared with somebody else, just a mention, just a vague mention, no supportive documents, facts, figures, reports, researches, then it becomes a weak argument. That's all I'm interested in. Even the weak argument may be correct and the strong argument may be incorrect as far as the problem is concerned, but I am not concerned with that. I am only concerned with the strength or weakness of the argument. Did you understand? So that challenges you from that perspective. Every topic tests a different aspect in your brain, right? and that is why everything has to be looked on at with a different lens. You can't just randomly generalize everything and approach with some 4 or 5 rules. Never do critical reasoning like that. Type 4 statement, course of action. This is your problem solving skills. Okay, your problem solving mindset, your solution oriented mindset is very important here. So that is what they're trying to test you to make you officers, that whether tomorrow if you put across a big problem, if you face a big problem, how are you going to challenge it, and how are you going to face it, and how are you going to solve it? How soon are you going to be able to understand and comprehend and solve the problem? So that is what is tested here. A solution which almost immediately brings down an issue, okay, without raising a lot of side effects, questionable side effects, is your proper course of action, right? Brief lines I'm giving you. Syllogism in itself is a very big world. It's a separate topic, though it can be merged with critical reasoning or deductive reasoning or inductive reasoning also at some extent, but we consider this separately. Mostly we learn it separately and we don't mix it here. So for me, what I'm talking about, this critical reasoning is this part. Syllogism we deal with separately, right? Now let's look at the traps, the common traps. Common traps. Traps means the examiner is making a question in such a way that when you read the question, you will strongly feel that this is the correct answer, and it's very obvious. Yeah, why not? But actually they are just trying to trick your brain. Actually the answer is something else. So that visibility, whatever is visible in front of you, you get illusion. There's an illusion created and you get disillusioned, and the problem is that causes to a disalignment and you end up marking the incorrect answer. That is what needs to be prevented. So you need to be aware of what are the common traps which are laid, right? So the outside knowledge fallacy. The first trap is the outside knowledge fallacy. That means they will pick up a very common topic, very common thing they'll pick up, which is very usual, a lot of maybe probably going on in the recent times, and they know that public is highly opinionated towards these things. Students, aspirants, they are all opinionated. So they'll give you a problem with a very limited information, and they will give you some statement, some conclusion, assumption, etc., which is somewhat an extension of what is given in the statement. The problem is critical reasoning, statement-based critical reasoning restricts you in that statement. You can't assume anything extra apart from what is mentioned there. But because of your knowledge and because of things which are going around you, you tend to depend on the external knowledge. You pick up from there and you end up answering. That means you make it personal. You give your personal opinions, and that is where everything goes down. That's the worst thing which can happen in a question. So never depend on outside knowledge. It's strictly, if it is statement, it is limiting. Always limit yourself to the scope of the statement. That's it. Nothing more, nothing less. Right? So these details I can share with you, so you'll go wrong. You can go through. Okay? This statement is my only truth. This is the mantra which you can follow. Right? That is, statement is 100% gospel truth. Nothing more than that, nothing less than that. The second is the navigating assumptions and inferences. Okay, that's the second most common trap. Assumption and inferences. There are two different things. Whenever I'm talking about assumptions, I am not talking about your assumption. That is the worst thing which you pick up. Whenever you read the word assumption, you straight away associate it with yourself, that okay, this is something which I have to assume. Okay, just imagine if there are 5 lakh, 10 lakh students who are sitting for the exam. There are 4 options. Every student is going to have a different assumption. How are we going to mark the correct answer? So then, to standardize, you have to understand that there is one person who is common in all these questions, that is a writer. So the perspective is always from the writer's end. It's always the writer's perspective. What the writer is trying to assume. And assumption is always something very basic, very obvious, which the writer tends to not mention in the question altogether, in the statement. While writing the statement, the author thinks that this is not worthy of being mentioned. This is something so obvious that the reader will understand directly. So then it is taken for granted, and hence it becomes an assumption. Whereas inference is something which you might deduce from the statement. So common inferences which you might draw, multiple inferences which you might derive from the statement. So there is a difference which you need to understand. The problem is, a lot of us, when we start critical reasoning, despite reading the labels, we fail to differentiate and we just apply one common logic to all the questions. Okay, that is not how it works, and that is why you're facing this issue of constantly giving errors and getting incorrect answers, because you are not differentiating. There is a thin line between everything, but you need to have that boundary, right? So also inference and conclusion in itself are different things, so you don't have to be confused there. Conclusion means, if I'll give you a simple sentence here, a simple statement, that all conclusions are inferences, but all inferences are not conclusions. For example, if I have a single statement, or I have a small paragraph or a passage, I can draw 10, 20, 30 inferences from it. I can draw an inference from the first line, from the second line, from the first paragraph, from the first 3 lines. 10 inferences I can draw, 20 inferences I can draw. But from the whole thing, the conclusion is only going to be 1 or max 2. Conclusions are mostly mentioned in the end, and I will require to read the whole thing to come to the conclusion. Whereas inferences I can derive from even 1 line. This partial line, what inference could I draw? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, done. So let's say I draw 10 inferences. Out of this, 1 of them is my conclusion. So if I draw conclusions, they are all inferences at one point in time, but all inferences can never become conclusions. You have to have that there is a small difference. In English, we use the words interchangeably, and that is what creates the biggest confusion among students, right? This is not required. We will not go in detail with this, so let's ignore that. Yeah, this is a very important test. If you want to learn it, I'll give it to you. This is known as a reversal test. Reversal test means, how will you test whether the assumption is true or not? So you pick up the assumption, okay? There's a statement given to you, you take the assumption, you take a potential assumption and you make it false. You make it incorrect. Negate it. That means, for example, if I'm saying that I am assuming that, let's say, Ram loves to play cricket and he is a good batsman. Now my assumption is Ram is a boy. Okay, I am assuming that Ram is a boy. I means the author is assuming. The author has assumed that Ram is a boy here. So that is so obvious that he has not mentioned anything. He has just not mentioned that Ram is a boy. It's a very basic, it's a very obvious thing, right? Now you take, this is an assumption given to you. You pick it up and you say Ram is not a boy. And then you ask, does the original argument fall apart if I assume Ram not to be a boy? Right? If it does, that means your primary assumption was correct. If it does not, that means your primary assumption was incorrect. Right? So that is how you can figure out the assumptions. But this becomes more important in terms of passages. In terms of statements, this might not be as applicable. Right? But this is the second trap, which is navigating, which is assumption, conclusion and inference. Extreme language and emotional appeals. This is the third most difficult trap and most commonly used trap. Extreme language means connotative phrases. Connotative phrases imply that they will use language which will confuse you up to an extent where you will not be able to decipher exactly the question. You will not be able to decode what exactly is happening. It will be written in English or even in Hindi, and it will be so confusing that you will read and you will not be able to understand in one go. So you'll end up spending a lot of time just to understand the whole thing. And eventually they are getting what they want. You're wasting your time. And then you're not getting the correct answer also. So you are being, penalized 2 times. So the best approach either is to leave the question, but if you continue leaving everything, then what's the point? How will you be, in the cream, in the top 1%, 2% students? You need to ace it. So that is how you need to differentiate that, okay, if this is an extreme language, I need to break it down and try to understand what exactly is being said. Sometimes things are just said to confuse you, right? And emotional appeal. A lot of question will have a lot of emotional and moral appeal, which is a general public opinion. General public emotion is, let's say, towards a particular thing. So they'll give you a statement. They will not mention anything about the emotion. They'll give you conclusions or assumptions which are related to the emotion, and they know that general public emotion is towards that. So you will generally tend to feel or connect emotionally to that point, and accordingly you will mark your answers, and that is where you will end up getting an incorrect answer. So that is why I'm saying, time and again, please dissociate yourself from the question. Don't attach yourself emotionally to the question. Your personal opinions do not matter. So whatever your thought process is about the particular question, about the particular topic which is being discussed in the question, please keep it aside and observe it from a neutral perspective, only limiting yourself to what is given in the statement. Assume yourself to be a Supreme Court or a High Court judge. Okay. I don't know whether you know or not how the functioning works of the judiciary, but the person who is actually at the position of the judge's chair has to be neutral, is assumed to be neutral, right? And so neutral that even if he feels during a trial that, you know, there's a strong association that this person is right and this person is wrong, he can't take the decision based on that. He has to take the decisions based on the available facts and figures. And if the person who is wrong has presented facts and figures, in reality he's wrong. We know probably deep down morally that he's not right, but whatever facts and figures he's presented, whatever proofs he has presented, they are all supportive, they are all premises which are strengthening his argument, and what the person who's actually correct, his argument is being weakened. So technically he'll end up losing the whole argument, he'll end up losing the case. So that is how decisions are taken, and that is how we are expecting you to take a decision. No personal opinions at all. You cannot cloud your judgment with that, right? So, okay, now we'll just see how can we make ourselves better at the questions. Okay, so what can we do to make ourselves better at the critical reasoning aspect? So we can deconstruct arguments systematically. Okay, we can break down the arguments one by one. So we can see, we can learn to realize what is the premise, what is the conclusion, what is the assumption hidden in the given thing. Now this is also more applicable towards the passage based questions, but less on the statement based. But these days you can assume it on the statements also. So if a statement is visible in front of you, you will read the statement and you will try to understand, decipher. So while practicing only, start practicing. When you read the statement, directly say what is the main argument, what is the conclusion, finally where the author is trying to take me here, what is the assumption he has made, list those 2-3 assumptions, what are the primary premises which are being used. Sometimes you'll have a premise, sometimes you might not have a premise. It's not necessary to have a premise each time or an assumption each time, but conclusion definitely will be there, right? So that is how you need to practice. Learn to identify these from the arguments itself. Arguments mean opinions, right? Now, willing suspension of disbelief. In simple words, if I tell you, okay, what you need to do is just dissociate yourself time and again from the real knowledge when you're doing CR. So you need to be constantly aware. Keep reminding yourself that no, I think I don't have to assume. No, nothing. Come back. Keep reminding yourself that I am dissociating myself from the originality, from the truth, so that it will become more and more easier, and you will come in habit where you will restrict yourself in that zone. Don't think anything more than that. So identify and calculate. Once you have broken down everything, you have found out a conclusion and assumption, ask yourself, am I within the scope of the statement or have I moved out of it? Am I still limited in the zone or have I moved out of it? If you are limited, very nice. If you have moved out, repeat this exercise. So purposefully dissociate yourself from the information given in the statement, which is outside the statement, so that you can stay away from it. The reversal test, I think we have already spoken about, so you can practice that. Reversal test is going to make it easier for you to attempt some questions, right? Evaluate from both sides means that if you read the statement, sometimes options also help you a lot. Sometimes some options are so definitely incorrect that you can select them, cross them out right away. So then you will have lesser options to choose from, and then it will become slightly easier. So approach from both sides. From statement also start evaluating, from conclusion also start evaluating, from the options also start evaluating. That will make it faster and that will make it more definitive, more easier for you to understand. Okay. And how can you improve your logical skills, your critical thinking skills? Solving games and puzzles actually help. Playing a game of chess might help you. You will say, how can this help me in critical thinking? Actually, when you play chess, you apply a lot of logic. You give your brain a lot of time to think. That develops a lot of cells, neurons, etc., everything. And there are transmitters, connectors. Recently, there was a research which is saying that you can still exercise even at this age and, draw new connections, new synapses in your brain. So that might help rewiring and developing overall. And for critical thinking, you can constantly practice. Read editorials. That is going to help you a lot. What does the world say about things? Be in touch with current affairs. Not just to answer questions in an exam, but to understand the depth of it and have an opinion of yourself. That is how things are going to change gradually. It's never abrupt. critical thinking skills are never abrupt. It's a skill which you master, which you hone over a long period of time gradually, and it is going to take a lot of input. So if you want to be masters at CR, you need to put in that valuable input, otherwise it's useless. You will always end up making it mathematical, you will always end up making it calculative. So stay away from that, right? Some brain activities: Sudoku, logic grid puzzles, pattern recognition games, deduction puzzles, logical analytical puzzles, chess, right? So you can play these games to improve your analytical skills, your deductive skills, your logical conclusive skills, and then accordingly use them in your questions, right? So pattern recognition, multi-step reasoning, I think these are the common benefits which have been mentioned here. So these might not be very important for you to understand, and that is what the summary of the whole session is here today. So you can master the core question types, you apply the proven techniques, you avoid common traps, and you practice daily. By keeping these 4 points in mind, you will be able to understand and ace critical reasoning altogether, right? So we need to be consistent, we need to be focused, and we need to aim at developing a logical mindset to approach this particular region of logical reasoning, which is known as critical reasoning. At this point, the total session, I have summarized it in front of you, and our primary objectives have been achieved, where I have given you an in-depth analysis of what critical reasoning is all about, how important it is from your exam perspective, where are the, where do you need to lay the emphasis, and how much do you need to study, how do you need to dissociate, and how you need to avoid common traps. If you keep in mind these pointers, you are definitely going to see a credible difference, a significant difference, a substantial difference in your approach towards CR. And be consciously aware and try to solve these questions. You'll get better at it day by day. I will once again say I'll add the link of the theory session which I have conducted in the past on this channel only for critical reasoning. You can go ahead and see that. On that note, thank you so much for joining live, guys. I'll end the session here. I'll see you around in the next session tomorrow with in-depth with questions of critical reasoning. Till then, bye bye, namaskar, Jai Hind.